This is the decoding of the film X-Men Apocalypse 2016, decoded by Sammy Kundalini. Okay, X-Men. Now we're going to take this in parts. So this is part one. We're not going to go through the whole thing, otherwise we'll be here for hours. So we'll just go through maybe the first 10-15 minutes or something like that, and we might paraphrase throughout the film. Alright, so X-Men Apocalypse 2016. Hidden symbolism, hidden message, hidden codes. Well, first of all, let's start with the title. The title is X-Men. Now, when we're going to look into anything, we have to look at the title and see what it's trying to convey, or what is it trying to elucidate to us. What is it in our psyche it's trying to take out of our psyche from a symbolism point of view, for it to store in the right hemisphere of our brain that we can look into it from a creative side. See, since that symbolism resonates on the right side of the brain, while logic resonates on the left. So let's go into it. X. What is X? Well, apart from a letter, apart from the 24th letter in the English alphabet, X stands for unknown. Alright? Unknown. Now, is there any way in history we could elucidate that? Well, we could look at the Nation of Islam. The whole thing with the Nation of Islam, like Malcolm X, Nation of Islam, why they had the X there is because during the days of slavery, you took on the name of your slave master. You had a Christian name, what was given to you by the slave master, and your surname was given to you by the slave master. So in other words, you didn't know your original name, what you're taken from. So now when you go into the Nation of Islam, they will give you a Muslim name and they replace it with the X, because you do not know what your unknown, your name, what you inherited, because you don't know what it is. So you become X until they replace you with an Islamic name. Why? Because X stands for unknown. Okay, let's go into X again. Now, if you think about the slaves, right? Slaves cannot read and write, right? Or at least they weren't taught to read and write in the language of what you have their captivities. Now, when you're going to sign for anything, you sign your signature. However, if you don't know how to read and write, and you don't know how to sign your signature, before you used to take your fingerprint. So you put your fingerprint down, and that verifies that's you. Because obviously, everybody's fingerprints is different. Nobody have this identical fingerprints. So they can identify you by your fingerprints, okay? Now, that might be a little bit hard if you just put someone's fingerprint down on a piece of paper and there's no laboratory, right, to elucidate everybody's fingerprint differently. So you replace that with an X, right? So black people, they didn't know the name, they used to sign an X, unknown. Let's go back to the fingerprint. So we come back to the fingerprint later. So the X stands for unknown. Also, what does X stand for? X stands for chromosome. You have the X chromosome, you have a Y chromosome. Alright? The man have the double X. Why the female have an X and a Y? So let's go on. So X-Men is to deal with a particular kind of men, right? Were different from other men because they had certain powers, and that powers had to do with X, and X has to do with the chromosome. So now we have to look into the chromosome to see what was different about this chromosome, because it's trying to tell you something. The X-Men had a different chromosome inside of that, what makes them different from all men. Alright? We're gonna wrap this up. Just have to be patient. Now, let's go into this for a minute, right? When we go back to the Bible, you talk about the whole Adam and Eve story and the picking of the apple of the tree. Now, if you're a Christian or religious person, you may think that Eve picked the apple of the tree because the devil told her so, and she gave it to Adam and he ate it, and because of that the whole world is in chaos. Makes absolutely no sense. First of all, there's nowhere in the Bible where it's explained anywhere about Eve picking any apple of the tree. It just doesn't exist. Most people, or most Christians, were told that the fruit that Eve picked off the tree and ate was an apple. And if you speak to them, they say they read that a million times. However, you go into any Bible, and I say any Bible, I mean any Bible. Nowhere does it say in any Bible about anybody picking off any apple off a tree or anybody eating any apple. That is something called mind control. So most people believe that Eve picked an apple, and a lot of Christians believe that they read it. Even though they read the verse and they didn't see apple, they believe that apple was there. Until when you show them back the same verse and they can't find the apple, they probably think somebody swapped their Bible. Right? It's called mind control. Just like there's a character in the X-Men who control people's mind. But that's the next story for another time. Okay? Mind control. So now, what is the whole apple and Adam and Eve and the apple? And what's this got to do with the X-Men? First of all, the whole eating of the apple claims so-called, there's no apple there, it's eating of the tree of good and evil or knowledge and wisdom. It was to do with the search of immortality. Nothing to do with eating any apple. The immortality. So before they ate of the tree, they were immortals. Once that tree, right? Once the tree of good and knowledge was partaken, they lost their immortality. So these people know there is a set of people, right? Or there is some kind of set of people who have certain cells is to do with immortality. So now they went out for the search for the immortality. So they went into the whole philosopher's stone and blah blah, etc, etc, etc. Don't need to go into that. Okay, so who are these people with immortality? These are special sort of people who have the X genes, right? X genes. Now let's go into this for a minute, but before, let's go back to the beginning. In the beginning of the film, or somewhere around the beginning, you saw a light up, right? You see light coming over from the sun or from the ear or something like. It went straight down into the pyramid. The pyramids opened up, right? And when the pyramid opened up, it forms an X. Because if you take a pyramid and you split it into 4 parts, from the top you'll see an X. Coming back to the X-Men. Stand that X on one side, you see a cross. What is that symbolic of? Well, first of all, they showed the pyramid lighting up, right? Then it went down into the pyramid and a man resurrected. Now, if you notice anything about this man, he was green. Everybody else was a different color. He was green. Bit like Star Wars. When you look at Star Wars, you have Darth Vader. Everybody is dressed in white. Darth Vader is the only one dressed in black. There's a reason. Who is this green man? You see, they made this green man appear to be the villain. But if you know anything about esoteric, you know this green man was Osiris. Osiris from Egypt is God. And Set, his brother, is Satan. Where the word Satan is coming from Set. Satan became Satan. So it's God and the devil. However, in the X-Men movie, they gave Osiris a negative part. They usually do this in the Egyptian movie. They did that with the mummy. They made Imhotep, who's the father of medicine, appeared as a villain. They did it with Stargate. They showed Ra as a villain, right? But Osiris in Egypt is the green one. That's why they don't tell you that he's Osiris, but they show you, speaking to you through symbolism. So the show is colored green, right? Green is Osiris, right? There's symbolism to green. In the Quran, the powerful one is called El Qadir, the green one. These are green people from a different dimension, which is the reason why they always talk about the aliens being little green men. See, when you look at the Marvel, not taken away from the X-Men, you have a strongest character in there is the Incredible Hulk. And he's green. He's green for a reason. When you go back to the corn, eating corn, C-O-R-N, they used to have something called Green Giant, a tall man on the corn, and he was green. They drew him tall and strong as a symbolism to say he's strong and powerful, and they made him green because that's what green signifies. So Osiris, being God, the strongest man, came back as green. Right, so let's get back to the light. The light came, it opened up the pyramid. This is an event called the helical rising of Sirius. Sirius. Now we know that Sirius is the brightest star in the sky. From a perspective point of view, from Earth, Venus would appear to be the brightest because it's closer to us. Sirius, that little star that flickers, is the brightest star in the sky. How do you find Sirius? You look for Orion with the 3 belts in a diagonal. If you follow in the opposite direction in a straight line, it takes you to the 7 sisters called Pleiades, 7 stars. Follow in the opposite direction, it takes you in a straight line down to Sirius, which is the Christ star. Sirius. What is Sirius? You put an O before Sirius, you get Osiris. So that star is Osiris, Sirius. It's also the same star where the 3 kings came to Jesus, if you want to call him that name, better call him Yahweh, and gave frankincense of myrrh. Right? So it's the Christ star, the Osiris star, or the God star. Sirius, Osiris. Right, let's get back to helical rising of Sirius. On the 23rd of July, every year, you have something called the helical rising of Sirius. What is the helical rising of Sirius? Well, on the 23rd of July, all the way through the night, Venus is the brightest star in the sky. Or Sirius, rather. Well, Venus would appear to be the brightest star, but Sirius is the brightest star in the sky. So Sirius twinkles as the brightest star all the way through the night until it's coming close to 6 in the morning. Right? So until it's coming out to 5:59 at 1 minute to 6 exactly. What happened? As Sirius is rising, it's called the helical rising of Sirius. As Sirius is rising, at some stage, it rises and it goes right behind the sun. Right? So the sun and Sirius is in direct alignment. So for all the way through the night, Sirius is a white light. At 1 minute to 6, Sirius goes behind the sun. And for 1 minute at 6 o'clock, Sirius and the sun is aligned. What happens? Sirius is a white star all the way through the night until it aligns with the sun. And then for 1 minute at 6 o'clock, it goes from a white star to a red star. What happens is, Sirius, the rays of the sun, along with Sirius, which is also a sun, projects together, right? And this rays of the sun shines on Sirius and it changes its color. And the two light aligns to each other, right? And it goes all the way down into Egypt and it's in direct alignment with the pyramids, right? And certain obelisks. And when it goes to the pyramids, there's certain shafts there, right? And it goes through the shaft and it lights up all the pyramids, the mummies and all the artifacts in the pyramids and so forth. So in other way, it's getting direct energy from heaven, a light, right? That's called the helical rising of Sirius. And people all around the world who knows about this goes around the world to witness this event, the 23rd of July, right? That's when that happens. Also, the 23rd of July was also where the ancients used to mark their new year. It's also the year Haile Selassie was born. Sirius. Now, what is Sirius? Sirius is the dog star. Dog star. Alright? The same dog star, what the Dogons of Mali talked about, who broke that down magnificently, right? Sirius A, B, and C, which scientists only just finding out the other day, right? There's a Sirius A, the Dogons talk about there's a Sirius B, what rotates around Sirius B, and there's a Sirius C, what rotates around Sirius B. This was in their teachings, right? And astronomers have just found that out the other day with their technology, and they want to know how on earth did the Dogons of Mali knew this. Sirius, the Dogons. How do you spell Dogons? D-O-G-O-N. Dog on. It's back to that dog again. Osiris, dog. Right? Dog. Dog back to front, God. Bear that in mind for a minute. Haile Selassie. The most famous Lassie is the most famous name for a dog, and Lassie is a dog, and dog back to front is God. Alright? And they said Haile Selassie was God. Now, when you go back to Egypt, in the film The X-Men, you always see these characters with a so-called dog head over them. That's called Anubis. Is a jackal. Anubis is a dog. Right? Bear that in mind for a minute. Now, going back to these X-Men. So that's just an introduction. So now let's go into the X-Men now. X is the unknown genes. What is the unknown genes? Well, you had a decade ago or whatever it was, 15, 20 years, whatever it was. You had a popular book called The Sirius Mystery, written by a man called Robert Temple. He get great reviews from News of the World, The Sun, and all their usual papers. Now, he's talking about Sirius and Ray, but he's coming with half-truths. These people don't fool me. But there was some, within the half-truth, there was something he said. He talked about Anubis cell. Anubis cell. He didn't really go into it. He didn't decode it. He didn't break it down. He's talking about something completely different, and he just said Anubis cell, and he started going on, continue talking about what he's already talking about. What is Anubis cell? Nobody knows what that means. I mean, it's just, you're thinking, you're reading this, you see Anubis cell, what is this? Well, you wouldn't know unless you know certain things. Anubis cell, right? Anubis was a dog. Dog spelled back to front is God. So dog cell encoded is God cell. So it's talking about a certain people has the God cell in them, right? Anubis, and Anubis is a jackal. Now, what is the dog cell? Well, let's think about this. In our body, we have 64 codons, what people call the junk DNA. 20 is turned on, or 22, right? 22 is turned on. The rest, because it's not turned on, they call it junk DNA. But when these are activated, right, it gives you other powers, and it gives you other. All right, let's put it this way then. UCLA University, UCLA, that university, and you can research this for yourself, right? Looking for why certain people didn't get sick, all right? Why certain people didn't get sick. So what did UCLA University do? You see, not too long ago on British television, they had a documentary. And I know it sounds like it's all over the place, but it's not. It's all tied in. It's about being patient, right? So they had a documentary, and this documentary was about AIDS. And what it is, there was this African woman, right, who slept with all these people who had AIDS, but for some reason, she couldn't catch AIDS. And they didn't understand why. And they realized there was quite a few people like that to the continent. Just would not catch AIDS. UCLA. So what they did an experiment as usual, and people get to realize that most people have 20 to 22 codons turned on. This woman had an extra codon, 2 codons turned on. So instead of having just 22, she had 26. And they get to realize this codon gives you extra ability and gives you extra power, and it cuts down sickness. They did the same test with a Japanese boy at the age of 12. Why? Because for the 12 years he was alive, he's never been sick. Never been sick. His parents didn't understand. And obviously that drew attention. And when the scientists ran a test on him, they found out that extra codons was turned on. Okay. Now, there was a film called The Omen, right? The Omen. Everybody knows that film. Most famous film, The Omen. The whole Antichrist 666, Damien. Right? Damien. And by the way, Damien has nothing to do with the devil or so forth. It's to do with a part of your brain what taps into consciousness, but that's the next subject for another time. Okay, so Damien. So, what was special about this film, or at least did they elucidate the point what I'm about to make? In this film, Damien is a baby, obviously. And at some stage, the father having a conversation with the mother of Damien about their son Damien. And he turns to her and says, paraphrasing, I'm paraphrasing, have you noticed that our son has never been sick? From he was a baby, he's never coughed, he's never had a cold, he's never had flu, nothing. He's ever suffered absolutely no sickness at all. Don't you think something strange about that? And the mother just brushes it off, me, he's just healthy, blah, blah, blah. But he found us a bit odd, never been sick. So anyway, as time's going on about this whole Damien, blah, 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 there's this black scientist, but just happened to be in a laboratory, and he finds something curious about Damien. So what he did, can't remember the film because it's years I watched it now, but he did some kind of experiment, or he found some papers to do with Damien. And when he done his experiment, he get to realize that Damien had the seed of a jackal. Makes sense now. Jackal, dogs spelled back to front, God. What is the jackal? Anubis. Alright, serious mystery. Anubis cell to do with some kind of cell, right? X to do with chromosome, the X chromosome, X-Men. Okay, so this child never got sick because he had the cell of a jackal. That's the Anubis cell. Okay, so now let's go into history now and find out whether this is a lot of nonsense or whether this is true. Because the only persons who sell usually has some abnormalities to it is usually Nubian people, whether it's sickle cell or some deformities to lack of vitamin D. Alright, so now let's go into the cells and see if anything can be elucidated. Right? Since it was from the first story in the Bible of Adam and Eve, it talks about Eve was created by taking a bone from out of Adam, right? And then made a woman. Impossible, so it has to be an allegory. So if something was taken out of one human being with substance, what created another human being, right? It's always cells is to do with what's in you. So now let's go into it. Around 1926, there's an African American, as they like to say, there's a Nubian woman called Henrietta Portimore, or she became known as Henrietta Lacks. Now, what happened is she had children, etc., being poor and so forth, raising up children, she became sick. So she developed cancer. So what happened? They put her in a hospital, but this was a hospital with just black people in it. They didn't put her in a usual hospital where you get the proper care and so forth, because we're talking about 1951 or 1950s, right? right? So they put in black. It was mostly black people in this hospital, but this hospital they were put there for more medical research, right? Under the disguise as a hospital. Okay, so what happened? Henrietta Lacks eventually she died of cancer. But what was interesting when they run a biopsy on her and they studies her inside, they get to realize that there was something different about her cells. It wasn't like any other human being cells. So what they do, they took out her cells. But what they found out is that when a person's body dies, everything in their organs and everything dies with it. The only thing lives on a dead person after they died is their nails. The nails continue to grow. Unless you're a pharaoh, your nails on your hair grows, right? But what they found out is that her cells was different. Her cells keep multiplying. It didn't die. It keeps dividing. So they didn't understand. This is something strange about this. She's dead, but her cells are still multiplying. So what they did, they take out samples of her cell, and they had this big meeting, and they realized that this cell was an immortal cell. So they took their sample out the cell, and they sent it to all different cells all around Europe to run a research on it, right? Research. So they took her out the hospital, what she was admitted to, the John Hopkins Hospital, right, in Baltimore, Maryland, 1951, right? John Hopkins. It was a man called George Otto Gray. He's the one who worked on her. So they get to find out that this cell keeps dividing. It was immortal. So what did they do? As usual, they take the cells and they send it to all the laboratories. And what did they do? Most of the medicine you're seeing today is from her cell. Not only that, the thing called the human genome, what took 10 years of research to build and $3 billion, right, was based on the cells of Henrietta Lacks, right? Henrietta Lacks. What they call it? Immortal cells or Hela cells. Hela, what is Hela? You see, you have to understand what's going on here. This is all coded, right? This is all coded, but don't worry about it, right? Because me know how to break down everything. That's not ego, that's just a fact. I'm a master teacher. I said that we neither shame nor apology. And if that makes me egotistical, then to hell, I'm egotistical. If it's, I prefer to call it the truth. Self-taught, self-learn, right? Self-taught, self-learn. A university don't make you wise. A building don't make you wise. Full building with a title in it don't make you wise. What makes you wise is your mind and your ability to attach to spirit and God, right? So I don't need no books to know what I know. I'm a master teacher, self-taught and known. Okay, get back to the point. Hela, what is Hellas? You see, in the Asians, in Africa, we didn't pronounce the letter H, right? We didn't make the ha sound, huh, right? The Asians didn't make H. H came about after English was decoded into a language. So when you spell Hela cell, H-E-L-A, when you take off the H, you get Ella cells. What is Ella? You see, when you go into the Bible is written, decoded in English. All the way through there is English apart from one verse in there, which is for some reason they left in Hebrew. It says, Ella, Ella, lama sabachthani. Ella, Ella, lama sabachthani means, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Ella means my God. So Ella cell is God cell. Nubius, Anubis cell, Anubis back to front, God cell. Alright? They made the human genome and all this medicine, and there's all this medical research is come from what's inside of you. You understand? So she becomes what? The mitochondria Eve. Giving life. Because Eve, in English, E is short for evil. But if we go back to the original mother of all living, Hawa her name was. Hawa means mother of all living. The mitochondria Eve. So Hela cell or Ella cell, Ella, they know what Ella is. That's why Rihanna, when she done that song, Under My Umbrella, Ella, Ella, Ehi, Ehi. Do you know what Ehi, Ehi means? Well, you only know that if you understand Kabbalah. That was another symbolism. That was very Kabbalistic, and she's speaking to, anyway, that has nothing to do with this. Okay, right. Now we'll come back to that in a minute. Now back to the film now, right? Back to the film. In the film, when the pyramids open, or just before the pyramids open up, they show the year 3600. That's very significant. When they show numbers in these kind of film, it's there for a reason. What's 3600? Well, 3600 BCE, before the Common Era or before Christ. What happens 3600? Well, you have to go back into Sumerian writing. Sumerian, the place Chaldea, Mesopotamia, Babylon, the place where they call Iraq today. There's a debate. Which is the oldest civilization, the Egyptians or the Sumerians? They're all Nubians, right? So some will say the oldest writing is Sumeria, which is cuneiform. Some will say no, it's Sanskrit, which is India. Some say Hebrew, right? But regardless of whichever one you say, it's always one of them three. It's the oldest. Now, the Sumerian tablets, right, is virtually similar to the Egyptian text, going back thousands of years ago. So some people say Sumeria was the first writing. Egypt, they didn't write, they had their jaw, they had symbolism. Now, in Sumeria, what's interesting about Sumeria, right? They have the sun in the middle and the 9 planets evolving around, which is kind of interesting because the West didn't know about Neptune until around 1896 or something like that, and they didn't discover Pluto until 1930. So they always had 7 planets. But here in Sumeria, they had the sun in the middle and the 9 planets evolving around there in their a direct order. Also, they also had a mystery planet near it. Mystery planet. They call this planet Nibiru, right? 20 years ago or so, scientists has found that there's an unusual planet or star in the sky, and they didn't know what the star was named. So what did they call it? Planet X. See that again? X. Planet X. This planet X, what they're talking about, is the same Nibiru, right? What the Sumerian talked about. Now let's go into Planet X and Nibiru, because this is significant to the X-Men. Every 3,006, well, basically in the Sumerian cuneiform, it talks about the gods come down and they came down to human, right? And they had children, and there's some kind of genetic engineering, if you want to look at it like that, going on, right? Bit like the Nephilim stories, where the fallen angels came down and slept with women and had different kind of children, right? Children that were powerful, they call them giants, powerful children, the Nephilim and so forth, right? So they were called the Anunnakis. They came down, and what happens every 3,600 years they come down and they leave. What's interesting in this Planet X is that they're getting to find out that this Planet X has an orbit around every 3,600 years. It comes into the Earth atmosphere. Every 3,600 years, Planet X comes into the Earth atmosphere. There was some scientists speculating that because of his elliptic orbit, there's a possibility if way into the future that this planet may crash into Earth. You see, what's interesting is that the Sumerian says that these extraterrestrials, these people like to call them, beings I prefer to call, right? These beings comes to Earth every 3,600 years when Nibiru is close enough to Earth for them to come to Earth. So if the scientist is talking about Nibiru crashing into Earth, that's simultaneously similar to say this is when they're at the nearest point and they come to Earth. When they come to the Earth every 3,600 years, there is a leap in technology and so forth in Earth, right? 3,600 years. So when they showed 3,600 years in the X-Men, that was the time when the gods were returning, the Osiris and so forth, which is the reason why you see the pyramid open up. Now what's interesting about the 3,600 years, they talk about a special set of people in ancient teaching was going to rise. These people are special, whether it's their cells or whatever, they're different from everyone else. In Revelation, they called it the 144,000. Now, let's go back to the pyramid. The pyramid had 4 triangles up on 4 sides, what forms a pyramid, right? When the pyramid opened up, there was 4 ankhs on 4 sides. The ankh stands for life. So in other words, it's talking about a life cycle. Like when you go back to the Vedics, they talk about 4 stages before the world comes to an end, right? They call them the yugas, the 4. Now you go to Kabbalah, you got 4 worlds before certain things are manifested, right? So 3,600 years, right? When you look at it's symbolic of 4 cycles. Like some people might say, to make a complete cycle, you have a moon cycle, sun cycle, moon cycle, and sun cycle, before the whole thing does a 360 degrees turn, which they call a solar year, right? Don't worry about that for now. Now, 4 cycles, and they showed 3,600. What's interesting about that? Well, if you take 3,600, that's 1 cycle, right? They come back again, 3,600. That's 7,200, right? After the 4th time, it adds up to 144,000. So 3,600 times 4 equals 144,000, which is the 144 special people at the end of time which are going to be raised. Right? It's mathematics. Alright? So let's go into it now. What is 3,000? You see, 3 add 6 equals 9. 9 is the highest number you could get. 144, 1 add 4 equals 9. Now, 9 is the highest, it's to do with the highest, the most high. The highest single number you could get is 9. The highest double number you could get is 99. The highest triple number you get is 999. The highest quadruple number you could get is 9,999. You can't get any higher than 9. What is 9? You see, when you go back to it, if you have to take every race on earth, right, and you take a bit of their here. So if you take a Europeans here, a Turkish here, a Chinese here, an Arab here, right, someone from the India here, an Eskimo here, and you put them all together, you wouldn't be able to tell which here is here. However, if you put a black person here in there, you see there's a difference. It stands out different from everybody's here. So they call it the crown. Where are we going with this? Everything in nature grows towards the sun. You plant a seed in the ground, a flower grows, it grows towards the sun. As a baby, you start off small, you grow upwards, you grow towards the sun. Everything goes up. The only thing what goes down, what grows, is everybody else's here. Why is black people's here is different? Because our here defies so-called gravity. It grows upwards towards the sun. And what happened? It grows up and it forms a curl at the top and it curls into a number 9. Right? Somebody knows something. Which is the reason why back in slavery, the slave master would put his hands on top of the boy's hair. You couldn't look in his eye and you had to call him master. He knew what he was doing. He was extracting something. 9. So 3,600, 3 add 6 equals 9 and 0 has no value. 144, 1 add 4 equals 9. Right? And in Egypt, they had something called the 9 Enneads, which is the 9 gods. Everything is connected. It's one big puzzle. Alright? Alright? So now they had the Hela cell. Hela cell. Hela, like helical rising of Sirius. Right? Hela cell, helical rising of Sirius. See the link? So anyway, before we move on, let's go back to the 3,600 years. Every 3,600 years, Nibiru comes close to planet Earth. And according to Sumerians, what's also interesting about the Sumerians is that they also made reference to 2 planets out of the 9 planets in our solar system, and they described them down to the T, the color and everything. In 1979, Viking 1 sent their usual probe and they confirmed what was written in the Sumerian script, right? The Sumerian scripts. So anyway, 3,600. What's so special about 3,600? Because you see, 3,600 BCE is what they showed in the film. So 3,600 before the Common Era. So according to the Bible, right, or the Quran from their point of view, right, Adam and Eve was born 6,000 years ago. Right? 3,000 years ago. So 3,600 will be 3,600 years into Adam and Eve. Alright? The year started at naught again after the so-called death of Jesus Christ, which would be 2,000 years ago. So if you take that 3,600, right, year, right, in time, and you add them up to date now, it will bring you to 5,600. Well, according to the Quran and the Bible, the Muslims and Christians, at the end of the 6,000 year is the return of the Christ, right? Which is why they have this year 2000, this YTO thing, right? And the return of the chosen ones, the 144, after 6,000 years, right? 6,000 years. So what happens then? In the Bible, or in Egypt, in the hieroglyphs, Meto, whatever you want to call it, it talks about a set of people was going to go into slavery, right? Going to take back another set of people, is going to capture them and bring them to their land and put them in slavery for 400 years. In the Bible, God talks to Abraham and saying that your seed is going to be put into slavery, right? They're going to take him from another set of people, from right and taken out of their own land and putting into those other people land, and those people were strange people with strange customs and strange ways, and you will be there for 400 years and after in slavery, and after the 400 years there's going to be a golden age where your forefathers will be buried in a golden age. So after the 400 years is a golden age. Now if you look at the year 6000, take away 400 years before the year 6000, right, into the 6000 years, it brings you into the 16th century. That will be around the time of slavery. 400 years after, we bring to year 2000. Alright? So you can see what's going on with this 3600. It's to do with a rising of people after that time. So whether it's the 144,000 or the person who reached the highest as a number 9. You understand? Okay, so now we're going to scale it down a bit before we get too boring. We're going to give you 2 more minutes and we're going to peace out. There is something which is in certain human beings, a special substance, what is considered God, holy, righteous, right? Sustaining in some set of human being, which makes them special or different from everyone else. Which is the whole Adam and Eve thing, where the whole thing where the Eve, mitochondria Eve, female, right, is subtracted from Adam, which means from the ground, nothing to do with man, because in Hebrew it doesn't say male and female. In Hebrew they're both called Adam. Male and female he called them and called their name Adams. Adam just means from the ground. So both Adam and Eve were known as Adam. Alright? They were both called Adam. So when it says that they took a rib out of Adam, it's not talking about taking a rib from a man. That's impossible. It's talking about taking out of the ground, because the ground is what? Carbon, the dirt, carbon, right? So something's hidden in this carbon, right? So now what's in this substance, what is translated to people, what's so special, which is the reason why body parts has become so popular. Now let's go back to the Bible, right? There's a story about Moses, allegory, story about Moses. Moses, right? Moses divided the river into 2, and Pharaoh and his army drowned, and he leads his children to the promised land. Or at least Joshua did anyway. What's this talking about? What's this talking about? Now let's go into the allegories and tell you what it really means, and not the nonsense what religious people are taught. Within the scriptures, right, there is secret teachings about this human body, but it's done in allegory, and there's teachings about the heavens, and it's done in allegory, right? But to put it in story form. So this whole thing to do with Moses has nothing to do with someone parting the Red Sea with a rod and the sea opened up and all that. You get those things in cartoons and films. Those things don't happen in real life. They're allegory. This is to do with a part of the human brain. Alright? Part of the human brain. So what is the crossing over of the Red Sea? The crossing is something called the blood-brain barrier. Within the human brains, right, you have a blood-brain barrier, right? You have the blood-brain barrier. The brain sits within the blood-brain barrier. And what is the blood-brain barrier? The blood-brain barrier is, if you take any harmful substance or certain substance, there is a barrier in your brain what tries to protect your brain for certain substance crossing over that brain barrier, because if it crosses over, it can be detrimental. Now, a lot of things cannot cross that brain barrier. However, if certain thing crosses it, it can also be great for you, right? Like serotonin or tryptophan rather. When you put tryptophan, especially tryptophan, right? If you have a large dose of that and it goes into the brain, it converts, it crosses the blood-brain barrier and it converts into a large dose of amino acid. And the amino acid is the building blocks of life, right? Amino acid. Now let's go into this now. Do you see, within the brain, you have 12 sections of the brain. 12 sections. The brain is divided into 12 sections. Now you have the thalamus, and in between the thalamus you have the pineal gland and the pituitary gland. The pineal gland being male, pituitary being female, right? The thalamus being neutral. These 3 is the trinity, right? That's the trinity. Now the pineal gland, right, when a mother breastfeeds, the pituitary gland is the master gland, right? The pituitary gland is the master gland. And when you talk about your 7 chakras in your body, right, the spiritual side of the pituitary gland is the crown chakra when you work with it spiritually. After the pineal gland, that be the 3rd eye. After the thyroid gland, that be the throat chakra, right? So behind the glands are chakras. 7 sacred chakras. These are secret wheels in your body which exalts power. Next subject for another time, the chakras. So what? When a woman breastfeeds, right? When she breastfeeds, she activates her pineal gland. She activates that pineal gland. So what happens now? When she's within the human brain, right? While there is contracting from the breast, in between the thalamus, right? And thalamus is a Latin word. These are words that are all coded. Thalamus in Latin means hidden chamber or inner chamber, right? In chamber. What's inside the chamber? Who stays in the chamber? All these have meaning. So in between the hidden chamber, there's the pineal gland. The pineal gland is male and it works off electric, right? Current. While the pituitary gland, right, is female, right? And it works off magnet. So you have electric and magnet, like electromagnetic or electro or magneto, right? Once these are postulated from the pituitary gland, it gives off a yellow fluid. A yellow fluid comes from the brain, right? Once it bloods and it goes into the child. From the pituitary gland, it gives off a white fluid. So the yellow fluid becomes honey and the white fluids becomes milk, because milk is the so-called color white and honey is yellow. These are secret chemical. Listen, chem, black, Michael, black, chem, black, Michael, chemical, black, Michael, chemical, right? So releases the black Michael, goes into the body, right? And it makes this child sustained and it has certain properties in it. Now think about this. I'm going to close with this. So that's why they call it the blood-brain barrier, right? So the parting of the sea, right, and crossing over, right? It crossing over. You see, these two fluids come from something in the brain called the colostrum. The colostrum. Colostrum means barrier. So from over the barrier, Moses had to cross over that barrier and he had to part the sea. The parting of the sea is the parting, right, of the fluid of the blood in your brain. And on one side you have the pineal gland, on the other side you have the pituitary gland, and in the middle you have the thalamus, which is the inner chamber, right? So it parts. Once it parts, right, the pineal gland gives off fluid, right? It gives off a yellow fluid, so that would be milk. The pituitary gland gives off a white fluid, or rather the pineal gland secretes a yellow fluid, that is honey. The pituitary gland secretes a white honey, a white fluid, that is milk, right? So the substance goes into your brain, crosses over, parts it, and milk and honey is released to the child, what gives that child something special in their body. Now, going back to slavery. Within slavery, certain people were seen as the most disgusting on earth, apart from when it comes to time for breastfeeding. You see, the slave master did not allow their wives to breastfeed their child. It always had to be the slave woman. See that again? Woman, mitochondria, woman. Why? Now you understand the Moses story. End of part 1, X-Men, Sammy Kundalini, peace out. So something from one human being can be taken out to give energy unto another human being. Right? Another human being. That's why when you ask for your signature, they're taking something from you. So X signature used to be an X. Signature. What is signature? How do you spell signature? Break it down to 2 syllables. S-I-G-N, sign, and then N-A-T-U-R-E, nature. So sign nature. So every time you sign something, you're signing over your nature. Alright? Now let's close it now. At the end of the film, what did they show at the end of the film? X-Men. Just show the character, I can't remember his name, but as a Marvelite, he's a regular villain. And they showed some fluid in the film with something was terminated or something X, terminated X. What is that fluid? That fluid, how do you make a vaccine? Mercury, you use fluid, and all different kind of fluids, and you put it into a sample of something, right? And you inject somewhere with it. You put it into a nozzle and you inject its fluid. So that fluid, what I showed at the end of the film, is going to be a vaccine. What's that vaccine for? Well, that vaccine is to stop the rise of these special people with special powers. Peace out.
From the